forcibly displaced people. These are refugees. There are women, children, there are unaccompanied minors, there are people in their 60s, babies as young as a few months old who have left everything behind. And so the distrust is very strong. And so it's really beautiful to see people decide to come together, take matters into their own hands and protect themselves, even when organized crime, the Mexican government, the US government, and everybody is pretty much hell-bent against them.
Welcome to a special edition of Only in America. My guest today is Alex Mensing, a project coordinator for Pueblos Sin Fronteras, a group that assists migrants and refugees on the move. Alex has been working with migrants from Central America for years and helping people reach safety. About a year ago, Pueblos Sin Fronteras caught the world's attention as a caravan of primarily women and children embarked on a journey through Mexico and to the U.S. border. Their goal is to turn themselves into officials in Mexico or the U.S. in order to seek asylum. These are women and children fleeing violence. They're not invaders. But the caravan attracted the attention and the Twitter account of President Trump. In response, he railed at Mexico, NAFTA, Dreamers, and the Democrats. Then, in order to keep the U.S. from being taken over by less than 1,000 women and children, who, again, plan to turn themselves into border authorities, President Trump is going to deploy the National Guard to the U.S.-Mexico border. Jennifer Rubin, a conservative blogger for the Washington Post, wrote, "So why do we need a wall or the military? We don't. Like his misunderstanding of the trade deficit, Trump doesn't know or care to know what the real border situation is. He built his political base primarily on anti-immigrant white grievance, and he'll keep going back to the well of xenophobia no matter the facts." So let's agree the president's version of reality has, well, a few holes in it, all of which makes the conversation with Alex much more important.
All of the people on the caravan had already fled Central America. And so basically, these are people who, for one reason or another, oftentimes because of some sort of death threat related to the gangs or organized crime or even the government, had left their homes and had decided to do what they could to distance themselves from that situation, oftentimes trying to get as far away as possible. But people sometimes get stuck in Tapachula because they might not have enough money to continue, or they're concerned about the dangers of moving forward. What that means to those of us who work with Pueblos Sin Fronteras is that they're forcibly displaced people. These are refugees. There are women, children, there are unaccompanied minors, there are people in their 60s, babies as young as a few months old who have left everything behind. And some of them are fleeing domestic violence situations that the governments of their home countries are not able to deal with. There are, unfortunately, especially in Honduras and El Salvador and Guatemala, very, very low rates of justice for victims of domestic violence. And there's a lot of case law in U.S. asylum case law about people who basically are unable to leave a relationship and their lives are at risk because of the treatment that they receive. So there are people like that. There are people who maybe witnessed violent crime committed by gangs or another criminal organization who are then targeted because they're witnesses. There are people who were displaced also by these large extraction projects from areas with mines, maybe because of police activity in the area, repression of the local community, displacing them. And there were people on this caravan in particular who were involved in protests against the current government of Honduras. Juan Orlando Hernandez is the current president of Honduras, whose campaign last year was unconstitutional. He was not supposed to be able to run for another term. Many of the people on the caravan are calling him a narco trafficker. And the United States government, unfortunately, has not only approved human rights ratings for Honduras, but has also supported the regime and recognized his presidency despite awful repression by the military. A lot of them are young people. A lot of them are people who are trying to figure out a way to survive, to protect themselves and their families, and who came together and put a lot of their faith in the collective power of this caravan, in which basically, because of the high number of people involved this year, have to depend on everyone taking part, everyone pitching in, the mutual support between all the people. And so in general, they're often distrustful because they come from communities where there is a lot of violence and where the walls, in some cases, because of the gangs, are painted with the phrase "watch, listen, and stay quiet," because that's the sort of the policy of the gangs, is for people to not speak up about what's going on. And so the distrust is very strong. And so it's really beautiful to see people decide to come together, take matters into their own hands, and protect themselves, even when organized crime, the Mexican government, the US government, and everybody is pretty much hell-bent against them.
And so is another reason why people have come together as a caravan to also avoid the human smugglers who, the way I see it, have really monetized the movement of people who are, at the end of the day, trying to flee gang violence.
Absolutely. And a lot of the people are basically people who ended up in Tapachula and are trying to get away. In some cases, they've actually received threats in Tapachula in Mexico from the people who they fled in Central America, but they don't have enough money to carry on. Definitely not to pay a smuggler who pay ever higher prices. The more militarized the Mexico and U.S. Mexico and the Mexico-Guatemala border regions get, the higher the price gets for smuggling. And so that's a real problem for people, especially people who are asylum seekers. These are people who have a right under Mexican and U.S. and international law to seek asylum, to go through a process by which they can be recognized as people in need of protection. But they're very frustrated. Some of the people on the caravan had actually attempted to seek asylum in Mexico to no avail. The Mexican asylum office right now is completely underfunded. There are people who went and were turned away. The lines are very long. And the headquarters is actually shut down right now in Mexico City, and they've completely suspended all time limits on processing applications.
So is that what's happening in essence to members of the caravan who are in Mexico now? Are they trying to apply for asylum and in essence not even able to get into line because there's just not the resources and Mexico's not resourcing the process?
That's exactly what's happening, yeah. And so in the next few days, we're going to be having a series of legal training sessions. A bunch of volunteer attorneys from the United States and from Mexico are going to be providing information about their rights in the legal process, and including the process for requesting asylum in Mexico. So hopefully through this legal aid process, some people will be able to successfully pursue their asylum cases in Mexico as well, because not everybody wants to go to the United States. And some people feel that Mexico is a safe alternative for them as long as they can avail themselves of the right to seek asylum there. And so some people will seek that out in Mexico, and some people will continue on to the United States to present themselves at a port of entry, turn themselves into immigration authorities, and request asylum.
So if there's one thing that you'd like the American public to understand about these families who are fleeing terrible situations in Honduras and have taken their lives into their own hands and the hands of the people they're walking with, what would you like the American public, who right now are torn between the pictures they see of families and what the president says, what would you like them to understand about these families?
One of the most important things for people to understand is that they're not endangering themselves by going on this journey in the way that people think, because that decision, even though it's dangerous to go on that travel, it's less dangerous than staying in their home countries. These are people who understand that there are risks to traveling through Mexico and to applying for asylum in the United States. They even understand that they will very likely be indefinitely detained in the United States by seeking asylum. They know that. And yet they are still motivated by the fear of returning to their home countries so much so that they're willing to go through that process. And we have something to do with that. I think another thing it's important for people to understand is that U.S. policy has contributed to the conditions in Central America that cause people to flee. And so the idea that people should just fix their own country, which is one of the common things that we're hearing kind of coming from the right when they criticize the caravan and these people, they've been trying. But the U.S. government, for example, is supporting a military dictatorship. The Honduran people voted this man out of office, but he stole the election through electoral fraud. and the United States government is supporting that. And so the idea that Hondurans are not doing anything to help themselves is completely false. And in fact, I think we in the United States need to reflect on our role in the instability and the political chaos and the violence that's happening in not only Central America, but other parts of the world as well.
Alex, I know you're incredibly busy. I want to thank you very much for joining me for a few minutes this evening. Alex Mensing is the project coordinator for Pueblos Sin Fronteras, who's working with a caravan of migrants working their way from Central America, seeking asylum either in Mexico or in the U.S. Alex, again, thank you so much, and thanks for everything you do.
Thanks for the time. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this special episode of Only in America. Go to immigrationforum.org for more context on all things immigration, subscribe to Only in America, and let us know what you think of the show by writing a review on iTunes. Our producers are Emily Chow and Regina Medina, and our executive producer is Kathleen Farrell. From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Nirani with Only in America.